Hi everyone, welcome to the second Evaluating the Position session for the October ECF Academy. So what we're doing tonight is we're going to look at positions exercises 9 to 16, and we're going to discuss the positions and then draw some conclusions. We may at the end of it put the engine on, see what the engine thinks, but it's very important that you evaluate it on your own first. And we'll be looking at the factors of king safety, initiative, material, space, quality, and structure. So all of these games are taken from the Challenges event, which took place about a month ago, and some of you have your games featuring in these positions. So you should be able to see my screen, and this is the first of the positions we're going to look at tonight. A game, Soham Kumar versus Harry Bryant, and the actual position in the game was white to play, but this exercise has given us black to play. So what I'd like you to do is tell me what you think about this position. Write your comments in the chat, please. And we're evaluating this position as if it was black to play. I'm going to tell you my thoughts on the position, and then we can discuss it. So I've got some comments here from Gregory. Rakaya, you weren't in the challenges because you were in the Terra final. That's one step above. Okay, so Gregory said, here I think white is better due to strong attack. I'm just letting more people into the meeting. Strong attack on the H file. It seems black's only defense is rook f7, which looks very awkward. And although white's king is in the center, it seems quite safe because of all the pieces around it. Can I flip the board? Okay, I'll flip the board, Jane, no problem. So this is going to be, an interesting evaluation. I'll just tell you what I was thinking, but that's a really good analysis, Gregory. And if I'd welcome anyone else to write their thoughts in the chat. So if I was looking at this position for the first time, which I did do actually earlier today. No, sorry, that's a lie because I saw this game live, but we're doing this position as if it was black to play. So I was looking at this and evaluating this live, but I had another look at it today, and my first thoughts are that black's king is not safe. So king safety is very, very important. It's not safe at all. White's got lots of major pieces on the H file. And then I thought, well, if black can defend, then maybe black's not getting checkmated because white's only got two pieces attacking at the moment. And then if we kind of look a bit further, I thought, well, white's king's actually not that safe because the king is stuck in the center as well. And yeah, so I don't know. I came to the conclusion maybe I'd prefer to be white, but if we could find a good defense, maybe it's equal. And the two moves that I was looking at for black here were firstly just to force that queen backwards with knight f7, although maybe I don't want to move the knight away because it's on a very good square, acting as a sort of octo knight right in the center, covering 8 squares. And then I thought maybe rook f7. And then how does white increase the pressure? So my evaluation, if it was black to play, which it wasn't in the game, would be I'd probably prefer white, but actually maybe black can defend. I wasn't sure between these two moves. They both looked interesting. And yeah, maybe it's fine. Maybe it's about equal. What else was there to consider? Yeah, like I say, white's king is not that safe. Black's got some attacking ideas as well, and got some well-placed pieces over on the queen side. So also, sorry, I forgot to say this pawn I thought was quite weak, and this knight is very powerful. So I think my overall evaluation is about equal. But I probably would take white because I do like the look of white's attack on the H file. So having a look at the chat now, Reyes says black needs to defend his pieces. Some of their pieces are overloaded. Fort Power says, I think that's best for black, but if I put it, black finds this with correct play, he'll have a slightly upper hand. Okay, interesting. Rakaya, maybe not upper hand, although black's position would be reasonable and equal. Hamza, knight f7 to force it back. Yeah, I considered that move as a candidate move. And Rakaya, well, a queen is more powerful than a knight. So yeah, I think these are the two sort of candidate moves I'd consider for black in this position. So let's have a look then what the engine thinks. Now we've had a discussion of it. Okay, knight f7, it says it's quite a bit better for black. I mean, I did consider this move, but I was thinking the queen might come back to stay on the h file, but it appears after that black has e5. And now this knight, if it moves, let's say to, well, it doesn't really have anywhere to move to. So if it moves to b3, then I thought black was going to take this pawn, but black's got an even better move, which is a4. And yeah, this does look very good for black, actually. So on that basis, the queen goes back this way. And once the queen's removed from the h file, there's no real danger anymore at this point in the game. So that's interesting. Black is actually better. So sometimes positions can be deceiving. It might look like because white's got the queen and rook on the h file and ideas of g5 that white is better. But if you can defend solidly, then that could change. So let's just yeah, actually Katie and Charlie are here, and they both did a really good analysis of these positions. I've got them open. I was just reading them before the class, so very well done for doing that and for submitting your answers in advance. So I'm just looking at the chat. If black can defend his king side substantially, then he's doing well. Yeah, I think you're right, Katie and Rokaya. Yeah, okay, brilliant. So that's great. And I'm going to take the engine off for a moment. Let's just flip the position back round to white to play. So this was a position in the game when it was white to play. I've got the position here in another file, and I'll just take that off so you can't see. So white went g5 and the knight went to h5 because otherwise queen takes h7 happens. And then this is a really thematic sacrifice. White played rook takes h5 and then a very strong move, g6. If white didn't have g6 there, white's not going to be winning really because it's not that easy to get to the black king, but it's a very strong move, and white went on to win the game. So hope you managed to analyze that, and I think it's quite interesting that black's actually better. So don't just get scared by the fact that it looks like white's got all the attacking chances. Sometimes you can defend and push your opponent backwards, and then actually advantages you have, like on the queen side here, really come into fruition, and black's doing well. Okay, so that was exercise 9. I'm just having a look at the chat. What's going on in the chat? Fork power. Oh yeah, he's given me his answers. Well done. That's great. Maybe you could just, when we get to each question, just write that answer for me. That'd be great. Otherwise, I'll have to keep scrolling up the chat to see what you think. Just having a look. Yeah, this occurs, these like sacrifices rook for knight in the Sicilian quite a lot. That's correct, Rakaya. Black's king is open. Yeah, that's true. We just discussed that slightly. But also I didn't think white's king was that safe. Okay, great. Let's move on unless anyone's got any questions. So exercise 10, white to play. This position was a game from the challengers, another game from the challengers. Let's just go. This was I think it was it Ria's or Rowan's? Oh no, it was Rowan. Sorry, yeah, I thought it was Rowan's game against Soham in the challengers. And this position is white to play. And we need to evaluate the position. So what is going on here? And please let me know your answers in the chat. If you've already written your answer, just repeat it to me and then I can see it rather than having to scroll up in the chat. That would be very helpful. I'm just looking at this. Okay, Gregory's got his answer there. He says he prefers white because one, they're more active pieces and becoming attack on black's king. Although black is up a pawn, the isolated d pawn looks winnable and there are much less active as well as an attack coming for white. Okay, so yeah, I mean, obviously material is very important. So when I was looking at the position, I did a bit of simple maths. 6 pawns there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So black's got an extra pawn. And I really didn't like white's king. I think it's really very weak. White would be very, very stupid to continue pushing these pawns because white's king is incredibly unsafe and black's king is actually very safe. In my opinion, it's surrounded by protective pieces. White doesn't have a rook on the H file or anything like that. So I really prefer black in this position. That's my evaluation. I think white's in a lot of trouble. Things might be different if these pawns were back on G2 and F2, but because they're so far forward, it really adds an extra layer of vulnerability to White's king. Remember, these are only my opinions. I haven't looked at the engine yet, but I'm just telling you how I'd evaluate this position. Feel free to challenge anything I say. And just looking at the chat now, lots of chat coming in. Let's have a look. So, let's scroll up for a moment. So, fork power, black is better and a good position with material advantage. I agree. Don't worry, Aidan, no problem. I'm recording the meeting anyway. Katie, White should focus on not letting black get the initiative and should put pressure on the IQP. Yes, maybe. But I'm not sure it's that easy to attack that pawn actually at the moment. And yeah, like I say, I think White's king is very unsafe. But that's definitely a plan to try and attack the IQP. As the attack doesn't seem to be coming soon, said fork power. Yep, that's true. I think black is much better and he has much more active pieces and White king is weak. And we have a passed pawn, says Humza. Yeah, okay, yeah, this is a passed pawn. Yeah, in the end game, that would be completely winning. But at the moment, I didn't even think of it as a passed pawn, but it is. Doesn't look like it's going to come to life anytime soon, but it may do. Charlie, I feel like I always have this sort of position as White and I just lose. Well, being a pawn down and having a weak king is not a desirable position, in my opinion. Fork power is agreeing with Hamza. Jane, I think the position is roughly equal, but if it isn't, then black would have an edge as he's a pawn up and White's king isn't very safe. Yeah, I think if the queen comes off, the queen's come off, then the king's safety issue wouldn't be a problem. Maybe these pawns would be good, but then obviously the problem would be that black's just got an extra pawn. White's defending and will have a hard time getting back into the game, says Charlie. Black's pieces are on good squares. Yeah, I agree with you. Rhea, black's king is well defended. His rook is looking at White's queen. Black has got good attack with his queen, but his queen needs for defense. Okay, interesting. Aidan, White's king's a lot weaker. Yeah, don't worry, Rakaya. I know you're doing well playing in the tournament. That's fantastic. Keep up the hard work playing for England. Okay, yeah, so that's my opinion. And I think some people have a similar opinion. It was important to notice that black had an extra pawn. And I think it's important to notice that White's king's unsafe. Black's queen's very well placed. Whilst you might argue this knight is well placed. I feel like it's not really doing anything over there. It's not causing any problems to black. And I'd probably prefer to have that knight, somewhere like F3, for example, over this side of the board. Okay, let's just have a quick look at what the engine thinks. Okay, look, -3. I didn't expect it to be that high, but to me, it was pretty clear that black was better. Let's just bring up the game. So let's get to the position. Yes, I think White was probably overly ambitious with G4. Black did get the pawn moving. I said it would take a while to get that pawn moving, but I stand corrected. It got moving very fast, and then it led to black just winning a whole piece, and then black went on to win the game. Okay, so any questions on that before we move on? If not, I'm going to move on. So exercise 11 now, black to play, and please let me know your evaluation. Fork power, black is slightly better as rook c8 takes advantage of White's underdevelopment. Gregory, here I prefer black a lot because of the extra pawn, and also White has some serious development issues because of the pawn on b2. The only way I see to start developing is b3, followed by bishop d2. However, after bishop d2, black can play bishop a3 and control the c file. And I don't see any play for White. An alternative plan is b3, bishop b2, but the bishop's future doesn't look particularly exciting here. Okay, that's a very interesting and comprehensive evaluation, Gregory. I'm just rereading it, prefer black a lot. So, a quick count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's what I thought. So I don't think black's a pawn up. But The position, I think I prefer black here because black's pieces seem pretty good, although I didn't really like the positioning of this bishop, but I like the queen, and I like the fact that black can get the c file, which is an open file. In terms of king safety, white's king is probably safe enough because it can't really be attacked. However, if black was able to double on the c file and get a rook to c2, then maybe the king would be unsafe, but I can't see this bishop being able to contribute. So I'm not too worried about white's king safety, but I am a bit worried about the fact that bishop's stuck on c1 to defend b2. Charlie likes, just having a look, actually, let me just scroll up before I go on to what Charlie said so I don't miss anything. Past pawn, says Rakaya. Aidan, white has a lot of problems with development. Yeah, I agree with you, Aidan. I think you're right. Black should take advantage of the c file. Yeah, I think you're right, Sanjay. Rhea, I prefer black because black's queen is controlling us. Yeah, this queen is very well placed compared to white's queen stuck on d1. I agree. I'd aim for bishop a3 in the near future, says Rakaya. Bishop a3 for white or black? No, for white. Well, at the moment it would get taken, but yeah, maybe at the right moment that's possible. Himza prefers black, seems good. Jane, black is better, it's easier for him to develop his rooks and his bishops. And Charlie, I like black as they have more activity and their king is safer. The d pawn is weak for white. Yeah, right. I think you're right. Yeah, it is weak. I mean, I think if I was black, I might be trying to reroute the bishop round here, but we've just got to be very careful. We don't let white's bishop into a3 and then, I don't know, the queen over here or something once the bishop's moved around. So we've got to be careful. But at the moment, I think this bishop is pretty rubbish. So we'd be looking to try and improve that. But also white's bishop is bad because it's stuck defending b2. So I would come to the conclusion I prefer black. Maybe not by too much, but I think I do like black. I mean, we've got to try and get this rook into the game because that's not contributing to anything at the moment. Hemza likes black. Joseph likes the c file as well. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you everyone for your comments. And okay, black's, yeah, minus 1.4. That makes sense here. So rook c8 is the best move. I mean, rooks love open files. I think all the analysis was pretty good there. So well done everyone that commented. So this was Joseph Zoe versus Austin Ivan and the challengers, and I think the position we had was like this. Again, white is pushing pawns around the king, and I do not like the move f4. It just creates problems for white's position. This is how the game carried on. Okay, this is that idea of, I thought it was going to go bishop a3, which was what somebody suggested in the chat. And again, we talked about this idea of getting the queen to c2. So white tried to stop that and then pushed another pawn. You've got to be very careful pushing these pawns. Whoa. This is, I'm not here to analyze this game, but it does get very interesting. And then white ends up winning. But I mean, I'm not sure there's best play. I think black is definitely better, and we've just confirmed that. So let's move on unless there's any questions. So exercise 12, black to play and flip the board around. What do we think about this position? I thought this was very interesting, actually. There's quite a lot of things to consider here. So I'll start with Gregory's explanation, very comprehensive again. Here I prefer black because of white's absolutely horrible pawn structure. However, I would say to win, black needs to keep the rooks on the board. Otherwise, white could try for a draw in the opposite colored bishop ending. Fork power, it is very equal, even though white has double pawns. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So pawns are equal. I would agree there. Structure is pretty dodgy for white because white's got 4 pawn islands and black's got 2. pawn islands where the pawns are connected together. White's also got 2 sets of double isolated pawns. However, I feel like that gives a lot of scope to the rooks, and white could, possibly get some pawn breaks in and open up more lines for the rooks. So when I was trying to evaluate this position, I wasn't too sure, because I prefer white's bishop to black's bishop because it's centrally placed, very hard for black to get rid of. Moves like f5 might happen, but then white could consider taking it. Sorry, when I said double isolated pawns, that was a mistake, because I forgot about the pawn on e5. So ignore that part of what I said. So in this position with black to play, I think I would conclude that I think it's about equal. The bishops are opposite coloured. I feel like white's got a bit more play, although white does have a compromised pawn structure. But black may need to improve white's pawn structure to actually get any play in this position. Okay, so let's have a look at the chat again. Florian, if black can get the G file, it could be dangerous. If black can get the G file, I'm not sure. Do you mean the B file? I'm not sure about the G file. I don't think that would be dangerous. Hamza, I think black is slightly better as white has bad. Yeah, a pawn structure is bad for white, but I think it's very difficult for black at this point to attack those pawns that are weak. Jane, I would say black is slightly better as white has 2 sets of double pawns. Aiden, queens are off. Open king isn't as bad, but I would still play black due to the better pawn structure. Yes, I think everyone's identified the pawn structure problems here for white. If I was black, I was trying to think, what would I play? Like, what's the plan for black here? And I was thinking, well, one particular plan may be to, at some point, open up the B file, but then obviously that helps white improve the pawn structure and get the rook into the game. So for black to make progress, black probably has to actually help white's pawn structure. And this bishop is quite well placed. And black's always got to be alert to something like bishop b7 happening. So I think I'd conclude this is about equal. Let's have a look at Mr. Stockfish. Okay, slightly better for black, but not by too much. So interesting. I think what we've all said is good, and I'm glad that everyone identified the weaknesses in white's pawn structure. So in the game, I'll just show you a few moves from the game. So black did push the B pawn, and that sort of helps white solve some problems with the pawns. And obviously I'm not here to analyze the game, but the game went on for a lot more moves than that. But that was how black decided to sort of open up the position. Okay, let's go to the next exercise, and if we've got any questions. Yeah, Florian, yeah, you're right about the B file, and that's what happened in the game. Brilliant. Okay, exercise 13. This was another game from the challenges, and we're looking at white to play. And can you analyze the position, please? So Gregory here, I would say it's about equal. I think for white, maybe try some kind of idea like the minority attack, but otherwise I don't see any particular plans. Yeah, I mean, at some point the minority attack being the 2 versus 3. Later on, that might be a plan for white. I wouldn't be playing it in these kind of positions yet because it just looks very good for black. Does anyone else have anything they want to add about this position? Jane, I think the position is equal, but possibly white has an edge as a slightly better rooks. I suppose the rook being on the half open file is a positive for white. About equal, but white has a bit more space, says Florian. Yeah. Charlie, I think the position is totally even. Rhea, I like white better because white's queen can go to d3 and white's bishop can take black's knight that is defending the king. I'm not sure I don't want to go to d3. I mean, we've got to be careful about losing that pawn, obviously not immediately, but I'm not sure I'd want to put the queen on d3. So, oops, I didn't mean to move that. So, I mean, king safety here isn't really in the equation because both kings are safe. Initiative, I feel like black's got a better queen. That's better placed than this queen. So I think that's a positive for black. Materials equal. Space, I think black's got slightly more space. And in terms of pawn structure, well, it's pretty equal, the pawn structure, although I do like the fact that white's got the half open file, which could be beneficial later. And if the queens came off, a minority attack might be a nice idea, as Gregory pointed out. Ada says the queen for white is almost tied down to the B pawn. Yeah, that's true. And even though black wouldn't be looking to take on B2 immediately if the queen moved, it's always going to be on white's mind in the position. They've always got to calculate it. So I also was looking at the knights, black knights, and I think this knight on d7 is quite annoying because it's not doing anything. It's kind of a superfluous piece where both pieces want to be on the same square, and that can't really improve itself too easily. So that was kind of a negative for black, in my opinion. But I concluded here it's probably about equal, but I did prefer black by a tiny bit. And let's have a look. Okay, that's exactly what it says, minus 0.2. And it gives the best move for white here, like queen c2. But yeah, it is equal. And it's an interesting position. Actually, just looking here, this position's been played before outside of the challenges. And that game ended up in a win for black. We don't need to look at the challengers game for here, but some really good points from everyone. So that's great. And thanks for identifying some of the key factors. Okay, this was Ed Jackson versus Aaron Saunders. And this position was white to play. Now, I think this is very interesting. So please send in your thoughts here. Gregory, in this position, I prefer black. White's pieces seem fairly inactive, while blacks are controlling the E file and pressurizing the D pawn. White's king also looks a little unsafe, and maybe moves like B5 and A5 to pawn storm are an idea. Okay, yeah, I think you're right about the safety of white's king. It's not very safe. Recurse is interesting. Can you elaborate on that, please? Florian, white has an open king. Yep, that's definitely true. I think that the position is equal, says Jane, though black's position is slightly favorable due to his extra point and good rooks. Aidan, interesting, white has two pieces for the rooks, so be favorable if the endgame arrived. So I think in this position, when I was looking at it, I thought that it was quite hard to evaluate. White's king is very unsafe. However, it's not that easy for black to attack it. And I'd probably be looking at trying to move the king to b2 just so it's a little bit safer and the king can protect the A pawn. I also thought that in terms of pawn structure, white definitely has a worse pawn structure, whereas black's pawn structure is pretty good. And it's yeah, I mean, I did struggle a little bit with evaluating this, if I'm honest. I think that, yeah, two pieces for a rook. Hang on, let me just do the maths here. So that's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pawns against white's 5. So there we've got 2, 3, 4, sorry, against 4. 6 against 4 there. So black's got 2 extra points in the pawns. And then we've got 6 for 5 there. So I mean, it's an interesting position and there's an extra point there, but I'm not sure adding points up really concludes what's going on here. I thought black having so many pawns was quite favorable for black, and normally the knight and bishop are good when they can actually do good things, and at the moment I don't feel like the bishop and knight are actually that well placed. They're not attacking anything, and white has a problem with king safety. So I think they need to improve themselves for me to sort of conclude that white was better. I know a lot of the time it's better to have 2 minor pieces, although it can be interesting. I once had an end game where I had 2 minor pieces against a rook and a pawn. I thought I was completely better, but actually it was a lot easier for my opponent to play with the rook because it was a lot easier to attack my pawns, and I actually lost the game. And I learned a lot from that game, because what I should have done was I swapped off one pair of rooks, but I should have kept a rook on for my position with the minor pieces against the rooks, and then I wouldn't have lost my pawn. So it's very hard to evaluate these positions. And I think here, yeah, I did struggle actually when I was looking at this. Probably would say it's about equal, but I think I prefer black just very, very slightly. In terms of king safety, white's obviously got a weaker king. Material, there's an extra point there, but I'm not sure adding up the points here is that important, because it's a different material imbalance. Space, black's obviously controlling more squares at this point. And pawn structure, well, white's got 2 weak pawns and black doesn't have any weak pawns really. Okay, these are doubled, but they're all supporting each other and blocking out this bishop. Okay, more comments from you guys before we have a look at what the engine thinks. Rukaya, black's rook is nice and white's king is open, but generally 2 pieces are better than a rook. So if white can exchange off queens, she thinks white's position would be preferable. White might want to win a pawn. How do you win a pawn, Rukaya? Everyone wants to win points, for sure. Bishop is a bit rubbish, says Aidan. Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking. I don't think these are very well placed. Dylan, I think black is better because more active rooks and king safety, but 2 pieces are normally better than a rook, although I stand by my decision of black being slightly better. Thought power says equal. Yeah, I think I'd probably conclude that it was unclear. Probably about equal, but it depends on how the position proceeds, in my opinion. If I was white, I'd be a little bit concerned about the safety of my king, and I'd be trying to improve my minor pieces, but this knight is very tied down trying to cover d4. And obviously, I mentioned earlier I quite like king b2, but then my knight is stuck because I'm walking into a pin. So I think I prefer black, but only by a very slight amount. Okay. Oh, look, it's 0.0, so it's completely equal. Okay, that's interesting. And it depends on how the players play the position. And the next position actually is from the same game. So let's just move on to exercise 14b. And we can see here, the queens have come off. Black is still a point up. White has not improved the minor pieces. They're still pretty badly placed, in my opinion. And the knight is still a bit tied down to d4. And yeah, I think this is very interesting. So what's happened is black improved his position, or has white improved his position? What do you think has happened in the last few moves of the game? Gregory still prefers black. Jane thinks the position is still equal, although black's extra material is getting more and more crucial as the endgame nears. Rukaya still prefer black. And Aidan prefers black. And it's black to play here. Any more comments? I know a couple of people had to leave at 7, but we'll carry on until we get to exercise 16. Black has the advantage, says Florian. Humza likes white. Yeah, I mean, the rook can definitely get to h7. White has got the open file. And white can start to put some pressure on the base of the pawn chain, which is the f7 pawn. Black has no attack, whilst white has all the time they want. Okay, that's an interesting point. I mean, I just don't like the position of white's minor pieces. That's what I didn't like about this. And these 2 pawns are still very, very weak. If I was black, in terms of a plan, what would I do? I was trying to think about this when I was looking at the game, because I think I saw this game live. Yeah, as Charlie says, it's probably not so clear. I mean, you could kind of tie white down so the knight can't improve. That would be one idea. Maybe at the right moment try and play c5 if you've got 2 rooks on the d file. But yeah, I think it's about equal, because I can't see a good plan for black, but I also equally can't really see a good plan for white, because yeah, we could go rook h7, but black can just defend the pawn. and it's not so easy to increase the pressure. Okay, slightly better for white, but not by much. So that's interesting. And the game they play, let's just go to this bit. White actually did end up winning. White put pressure on that pawn and then was able to maneuver the knight round. So black should have made it so that that knight couldn't move. Like I say, I'm not going to analyze the game, but now that knight's become an amazing piece and white's just doing really well. But with the knight on b3 tied down to defending, it's not well placed. But as soon as white can improve the minor pieces, white's doing well, because at the end of the day, white's actually got an extra piece. And so if they're attacking, white can put more pressure on because he's got an extra piece. And that's why the knight and bishop are generally thought of as better than a rook and a pawn. But here, black's actually 1 point ahead. Okay, great. Let's carry on unless there's any questions. And please do feel free to ask questions, because I'm just analysing these positions like you guys are. I think it's interesting for us to have a chat about them and share ideas. So this is exercise 15, the penultimate one we're going to go through in tonight's session. So please put what you think of this. It's black to play, another game from the challengers. I'll flip the board around if you guys want me to, and tell me what you think of this position, please. Remember to go through the points: king safety, initiative, material, space, quality, and structure. Gregory has another great answer. So here it looks seriously obvious for black with a strong g5 pawn. Oh, sorry, dubious. If they play h5, as far as I can see, you can play the amazing sacrifice, rook takes h5, g takes h5, queen takes h5. So their only choices are rook e8 or f5, which both look like the result in the black king going on a long and scary walk. Yeah, we wouldn't want to get our king out into the open fire. Rakaya, I prefer white's position. Florian, white should try and attack but defend his king at the same time. White has double pawn, says Ria. Black has an active knight on an outpost. Jane, I think the position is equal but not quite so simple, as black is a pawn up and white has chances on the H file. Aidan, black is a pawn up and white has dubious G pawn, but white could launch as the sacrifice. Okay, so let's think a bit further. So it's black to play. I think you guys have correctly identified that black's king is weak. White's got some real attackers pointing towards the king. The bishop's not really helping there. And I would be a bit scared about white's attack, for sure. You know, ideas just like knight f6 coming and then rook takes h7 look very scary. White, if the queens are off, then black's got some good play over on the queen side. But at the moment, as we said, king safety is the most important thing, and I'd be really nervous because the knight is going to hop into f6 if it's allowed to. I wouldn't say white's king is safe, but I would also probably say maybe it is because it can't be attacked. It might look like it's out in the open, but black doesn't have a bishop or anything to attack it. We'd have to be a little bit careful about the e file. But at the moment, the bishop's actually, even though it's a bad bishop, it's holding the fort on the e file. In terms of pawn structure, somebody identified, white has two weak pawns, which are both isolated, and white does have double pawns, but those double pawns are quite good because they enable white to have the half open file, and they secure f6 for the knight if the knight can get there. So overall, I think white is doing pretty well here. I'm just looking at the chat. Black can survive, I think, knight e4, but it is better for white. Well, I think white's position looks easier to play. White's got a nice attack on the king coming. So, I mean, if black just plays a silly move, then black's in trouble. So black to play. And this is a game from Kuzlev and Anam Sheikh in the challengers. Aidan, knight d5 does work. Yeah, I mean, I think when I was looking at the position, I think that's pretty much the only move, because otherwise we're just going to lose. And that knight is going to be happy there. It comes into its own because it's not shadowing this knight, but have we considered what happens if the queen takes this knight? Yeah. Okay, so what does black play? What does black play? Any moves for black here? Because knight d5 did look like a good move, but given that it hangs a knight, probably isn't. Material is important. Black is a point up in the current position, but obviously if knight f6 happens, then black's just going to be losing. f5, only move for black to survive. So f5, and it's an important idea if you've not seen it before, because it means that the rook has got some scope and it gives the king a bit of space. Okay, so the engine evaluation in this position is slightly better for white. It's a lot easier to play for white. That was an only move. If you don't find f5, then you're just lost. If the knight were to hop into f6 now, then black can very happily sacrifice an exchange. And these pawns look very strong. These knights look very strong. And the game goes on despite... Oh, actually, black's not even material down because black was a pawn up in the initial position. And I actually quite like black in this position. The rook's out of play. So that's interesting. Now, in the game, let's just go to this happened. And, oh, actually, I did see this live. This was quite a nice move, white castle. And white ended up winning. Couldn't stop the checkmate. So the thing is, it is equal, but it was an only move that black needed to find. And then you're kind of playing quite risky chess, because if you don't find that move, you just lose and you might be in time trouble. So it's very easy to play for white because white's got a nice position and a nice attack. So whilst the engine says it's equal, I would say it's just a lot better for white from a practical perspective. You can play en passant, but we just looked at that at Rakaya and it's not great. Because black just sacrifices the exchange. Okay, great. Let's go on to the last position, unless anyone's got any questions. If you have, just put them in the chat and I'm happy to answer them or attempt to answer them. Let's take the engine off. I didn't mean to do that. This is black to play. This was a game played between Charlie Hill and Adam Hussein in the Challengers. Charlie's in the meeting, so I'd be interested to see what you thought of this position, Charlie. Gregory says he prefers black because of their pressure on the F file and the weak-looking E pawn. They could also go for pressure by putting a rook on the B file. Humza, black is better as he has more space. Charlie, lol, I remember this. I thought it was way better for me. Confidence is good, but obviously you've got to be looking at what's going on. But it is good to believe in your position, as Anish Giri always says. Black because of the rook. Yeah, I mean, when I was looking at this position, I thought, well, black's got the bishop pair, but the bishop pair is only good in an open position. So if I was black, I'd be trying to open up some lines so these bishops can come into their optimal positions. Black's also got the half open file, which is pretty good, and scope to get another half open file quite easily. And then white's going to be quite tied down with the pawn on b2. So I would even be considering doubling on the b file at some point. What else did I think here? I thought it's not, I think I prefer black, but it's not that easy for black. King safety is not really an issue here. Both kings are very safe. And that's it really. I thought black was probably better because of the strength of the rooks, but I would be trying to improve these bishops. The bishop pair will really increase in value when the position opens up. Charlie saying bishop g5, and he can remove the bishop pair. Well, at the moment it's black to play though, and that probably does come at the cost of the pawn in some variations. And maybe the bishop pair is not the dominant factor here anyway. Jane, sorry, I'll just go back. So I've missed a few things in the chat. I find it hard to decide. I think it's even, says Raya. I like the white king, but also like black's pawns. Black has slightly less active minor pieces, but have the half open file, says Arian. Dylan thinks black is better as he has the bishop pair and an active rook. Jane, I think that black is slightly better as he has a good rook and the bishop pair, though that may not be an advantage in positions like this. Black doesn't have great pawns though. And Rukaya thinks black's only slightly better. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think also Aidan's pointed out the pawn structure. I think black's pawn structure is pretty good. And I think the pressure on the b file could be quite annoying for white. So black to play, and so black's slightly better, just a point advantage here for the reasons that we've discussed. And it's going to be quite hard for white to play this position. The game, it got a bit challenging for Charlie, but it was an interesting position. Just got in some trouble there at the end and had to resign, but these were only quite fast games in the challenges. So let's just go back. So they're the positions that we wanted to discuss tonight, and I think you guys have done really well at analysing all the different factors. Obviously, here to say that black's got the bishop pair, it's good, but it's not really an advantage in this position, but it could be an advantage. It just depends on what happens. But for me, the main dominating factor here is the rooks for black are a lot stronger, and white could be a bit tied down with the b pawn. So I hope you enjoyed that, and it's really good to discuss ideas as a class. And just remember though, king safety is the most important thing. I always have people saying, well, I was piece up. It doesn't matter if you're going to get checkmated in one move. Ray, you can ask a quick question and then we're going to finish because I know a few people have to leave. Just write it in the chat if that's okay. Thank you. And I think I'll end the recording now for those that couldn't attend tonight. Bye, Charlie.